On the right, Pat Buchanan. In the Crossfire, in Washington, Louis Alisa, president of the Boston NAACP. And in Boston, Albert O'Neill of the Boston City Council.
Good evening and welcome to Crossfire. It's like an Alfred Hitchcock movie. 10 weeks ago, Boston was aflame over a criminal atrocity, horrifying even by today's grisly standards. The story as of then: Charles Stuart, 29, and his pregnant wife, Carol, were accosted outside a maternity hospital by a black man who kidnapped the couple, forced them to drive to the Mission Hills area of the inner city, robbed them at gunpoint, shot Carol in the head, and left Charles with a dying wife, a bullet in his stomach, desperately calling police for help. Here is Charles Stewart's anguished call from his car phone as recorded by the Boston police.
My wife's been shot. I've been shot.
Where is this, sir?
I have no idea. I'm off. I've been coming from Tremont, Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Try to give me an indication of where you might be, across street or anything else, sir.
Well, I don't know. He made us go to an abandoned area.
Okay, sir. Can you see out the windows? Can you tell me where you are, please?
No. I don't know. I don't see any signs. Oh, God.
Can you give me any indication where you might be? Any buildings?
No.
Okay, has your wife been shot as well?
Yes. In the head. Should I try to drive or should I stay where I am?
No, stay exactly where you are. The people that shot you, are they in the area right there?
No, they took off, or they left.
Help's going to be on the way. Bear with me. Is your wife breathing?
I just feel it gurgling.
Shot.
There's a busy street up ahead. Oh, man.
Shot also.
I can't see where I am. I'm turning onto a busy street. I recognize where I am now. Should I drive to the hospital?
Just tell me what the street is, Chuck.
Oh, man. I'm pulling over. Tremont Street.
You're at Tremont?
Oh, man, I'm going to pass out. I'm blanking out.
You can't blank out on me. I need you, man. Chuck.
Oh, man. It hurts, and my wife is self-gurgling. She's self-breathing.
Chuck, I'm going to get assistance to you, buddy. Open the door. Talk to someone on the street.
I can't move. Oh, God.
Chuck, can you see anyone on the street?
I'm looking. There aren't too many people.
Carol died quickly. The baby, born prematurely, lived for 17 days, and as hordes of police scoured Mission Hills for the killer, Charles Stuart spent 6 weeks in a hospital. Yesterday, however, police pulled the body of Charles Stuart out of Boston Harbor, 300 feet below Tobin Bridge, from which he had jumped to his death. According to police, after Stuart identified the black man who supposedly killed his wife, Stuart's brother Matthew told authorities that Stuart himself had planned, practiced, and carried out the killing. Hearing the police were about to arrest him for his wife's murder, Charles Stuart left a suicide note and jumped to his death. In Mission Hills tonight, there is both rage and resentment over the treatment received at the hands of police, politicians, and press alike. Is it not justified? Michael?
Pat, before we get to that interesting debate, we're going to chat for a few minutes with Ron Golleben of our CNN's affiliate, WCVB-TV in Boston, who's been covering Boston politics for 15 years and has been following this particular story since the beginning. Ron, thanks a lot for coming on. What is new today? Pat gave us the basic outlines of the story. What came out today?
Well, apparently, Charles Stuart confessed to a family friend, a source, a reporter from my station, had the story today exclusively that Charles Stuart, the night before he jumped to his death, confessed that he shot his wife and meant to shoot himself in the foot, but flinched as he pulled the trigger and shot himself in the abdomen. He said he did it for the insurance money. It was about $500,000 worth of insurance policies. 2 of them were taken out about 2 weeks before his death. He also said that he and his brother Matthew were involved in a plot to kill Carol Stuart, apparently 3 weeks before the actual murder.
Now, Charles Stuart, of course, is dead, but the big unfinished business is Matthew Stuart, his brother, whose story is a little fishy, isn't it? He says he met Charles at this intersection, was handed the purse with a gun in it and an engagement ring, took the purse back, threw the gun in the river, and so on and so forth, but didn't suspect until weeks had gone by that Charles was responsible for the murder. It's a little implausible, isn't it?
It seems to me, in light of the earlier plot, that if he was in on a plot allegedly to kill Carol Stuart 3 weeks before it actually happened, and then he was passed this bag with a gun in it, I don't see how he couldn't have known what was going on.
Tell us about that plot. The Globe reported the Boston Globe reported, but it was unclear whether this is just a rumor or something that's actually known, that they actually had a plan to kill Carol Stuart in their house by having Matthew, the brother, pretend to be a burglar. Is that correct?
As my understanding, our source confirmed it tonight, that the brother, Matthew, was hiding in the house, and that Charles and Carol were at a party, and she ate something that didn't agree with her, got sick, and came home early, and that Matthew had to leave.
All right, Mr. Gollivant, Pat Buchanan here.
Hi,
Has
Pat.
there been any, let me ask you, it seemed a bit odd that even at the time, I believe, Charles Stuart was shot in the abdomen by a gunman who was in the back seat of the car. I mean, did anyone follow up that it seemed strange? She was shot in the head and he's shot in the abdomen from the back seat?
Well, his story was at the time that his wife was shot first, and that when he heard the shot, he scrunched down in the seat. So it doesn't seem particularly implausible. The question I would have is, why would a gunman shoot the woman first, a 7-month pregnant woman? Why not take out the man first? He was the biggest threat.
All right, let me follow up now. My understanding is that Charles, as you mentioned, the bigger threat, is shot with a different kind of bullet or a different caliber of bullet than Carol was shot with?
I think that was incorrectly reported. I think it was the same gun. I think they were both 38 calibers.
Okay.
Ron, hindsight, of course, is very easy, but in hindsight, shouldn't we and you and the police and everyone else have been a bit more suspicious of this story of Charles, that he didn't happen to have his wallet? And shouldn't the police have been slower to leap to the conclusion that, well, that meant he was shot because the black man thought he was an undercover cop?
Well, it's easy to be a Monday morning quarterback. However, I think that an insurance policy taken out 2 weeks before a murder should have triggered alarm bells all over the place. More interesting to me is the suspect, William Willie Bennett, who was involved in the lineup the Thursday before, actually a week ago yesterday, and was what Charles Stuart actually said was, he looks most like the man who shot my wife and I. And it was reported in the papers, both the Boston Globe and the Boston Herald, that it was a positive identification. And apparently this is what moved Matthew Stuart to come forward, that perhaps a thought that an innocent man was going to jail for something his brother did.
This fellow Willie Bennett, I understand, Mr. Gollivant, he's got a long record. He's in jail right now for other offenses. Is there any suggestion of any connection of his with the crime as of now?
Well, yesterday the district attorney exonerated Willie Bennett of any connection whatsoever. There have been a tremendous number of rumors. I've been covering crime for 22 years and I've never seen a case like this. It is the most bizarre, and there have been so many rumors. It has been absolutely wild, and trying to check these things has been very difficult for reporters.
Okay, thank you very much, Ron. It's an incredible story. You may be wondering, where's the crossfire in it? Well, we're going to have a debate about the question of racism when we come back in a moment. That amazing true-life crime story out of Boston today. Charles Stuart, white and middle class, riveted the nation last October with his saga of being attacked by a gun-toting black man while leaving a birthing class with his pregnant wife. The wife and child died. Stuart spent 3 weeks in a hospital, and police had a suspect in custody. But yesterday morning, Stuart jumped to his death from a Boston bridge as evidence emerged that he himself had plotted and executed the murder. However, there's more to this story than just melodrama. Some blacks in Boston have been complaining since the original incident that the reaction of whites, and police in particular, has been to punish the entire black community. Now, of course, these critics feel especially vindicated. Here is State Representative Gloria Fox.
We are not the culprits, haven't been the culprits. We are usually the victims, and once again, we have been victimized and wronged by not only the media, but everyone else involved, including the law enforcement agencies.
Here to bat this ball around a bit more is Louis Elisa, president of the Boston chapter of the NAACP. And in Boston, we have City Councilor Albert Dapper O'Neill, who was with us 3 months ago, shortly after the crime itself. Dapper, when you were on the show the last time, you were out for blood. You were screaming about that unknown killer. You said, if he's screaming for his rights, I'll give him his last rights, and then I'll pull the switch. Now, you know, you might have pulled the switch on an innocent man, Willie Bennett. Don't you think that ought to give you pause before you talk that way? And maybe ought to even give you pause about the death penalty?
No, I wouldn't say that. It was such a heinous crime that that's exactly the way I felt. But now this Perry Mason story and Alfred Hitchcock story, it seems to get more confused every day of the week. And when I made that statement, I meant it, that I would give them the last rights, whoever did it.
Well, I don't doubt that you meant it, sir, but the question is, doesn't this illustrate why we have criminal rights, which so many people like you are always eager to denounce? Why perhaps we shouldn't be executing people because we might be wrong, new evidence can come up, amazing things can happen. Shouldn't it make us a little bit more modest when we're making a lot of accusations?
Mike, wouldn't you concentrate most of your time on the victims' rights once in a while? Everything is the criminal rights. What about the rights for the victims?
What about Willie Bennett's rights? Weren't they being trampled?
Willie Bennett's rights? I'll tell you about Willie Bennett's rights. First of all, he's waiting trial now for three armed holdups, and he shot a policeman. But he'll be given his rights on those charges. However, what I'm saying to you now, if you listen to the tape the way I listen to it and I see it on television, first of all, Stuart said he drove us, and then he changed it and he said he made us drive. You know, what's going to happen here, and I hope it does, and it's still under investigation. I hope the district attorney gets a hold of Matthew and is on him day in and day out. The police, what were they supposed to do? 16 hours a day, black and white police officers on this case, working hour after hour, day after day, month after day, month after month. And now this comes up. You know, what are we supposed to do here?
Right. Mr. Alyssa, you said the story that Mr. Golliman was telling us was incredible. You said that. Why?
I think the whole situation is incredible, Pat. I think that when you look at it, that everyone failed to do their job. The mayor, who's the leader of the city, failed to do his job to protect the rights of African Americans equally. That in a sense, he created hysteria by going out and demanding or calling out all available manpower. I think the police commissioner failed to do his job in advising the mayor that he should not get in front of him on this issue and let this be handled by the law enforcement community. I think the district attorney failed to do his job also to protect the civil and constitutional rights of the citizens, African American citizens in that city. When he had information, he did not call the police. You think it was a
racial thing?
I believe that it quickly moved to a racial issue. I think that it moved out of the area of just a crime, a passion or a crime of hatred.
Let me tell you why I think you're wrong, Lewis, and this is it. We heard Miss Fox there, all right? She said, you know, the black folks, they went after them. They didn't go after black women. They didn't go after black old folks. They didn't go after teenagers. Hold it. They went after guys that fit the description of the alleged killer.
That's not true. That's not true. They went after everybody. They threw a dragnet over the black community, extending miles from the epicenter of that incident. They had roadblocks in the black community. They stopped women. They stopped teenagers.
Hold it.
They stopped any person that they thought might be connected or could fit the description, and they did it without regard of gender.
You yourself said anybody that could fit the description. Now, the description Stuart gave was of a 30, 35-year-old black male.
He gave two descriptions. That's number one. But the police weren't going in there at first stopping people who just were males. They stopped every car. They had a roadblock.
Well, exactly what they should do.
No, that's not what they should do. They don't do that in the white community and there's a crime. There was a murder in the suburban parts of the white community. They didn't throw a dragnet or a blanket over that.
I'm not going to sit here and listen to that, okay?
Go ahead, Dapper.
Now, you listen to me, Lewis, for 1 minute. Every time you open your mouth, it's racial. Supposedly, if it was a white fella that shot the two of them, would that be racial?
If it was a white fellow, Dapper, the mayor wouldn't have called out 100 extra policemen calling all overtime. He's never done it before.
Because
you had white people killed in South Boston.
I'm not sticking up for the mayor, but
when did they call out all the available police officers?
Lewis, your tactic is to keep talking, and I'm telling you now to keep quiet. You might learn something. They came all out.
From you, Dapper.
Now listen to me, Lewis, for a minute. Everything with you is racial. Racial this and racial that.
No, everything isn't racial. It's what is racial is racial. They have never done that for any other case in Boston. They never did that when they...
put more policemen on this case of any case in this city.
And the history of this city.
What were they supposed to do? And if they didn't do that...
They were supposed to handle it like every other criminal case in the city.
Stop playing the game with me now. Stop interrupting me.
Dapper, it's no
Stop
game.
interrupting me.
Dapper,
it's no game.
Let him talk, and then
the rights of African American people,
and I'm not going to sit here and listen to you.
You're both misbehaving. You go for a little while, Dapper, and then we'll let you respond, Lewis. Go ahead.
I'm trying to say this to you, that every available officer in this city, whether they were black officers and they were white officers, They did everything to try to get this thing solved. And Lewis, right away, you're with the racists. You want to fire this one, fire that one. He didn't do his job. You went there. I went there. Let them do the job. This investigation is still going on, and I still say that they ought to get on the brother Matthew, and we're going to find out more. And when we do find out more,
Lewis,
then what are you going to say? What are you going to say then, Lewis?
Hold it, Dapper,
let's be clear on one thing. The night of the shooting, I was there at the station. I was there when they were calling in all the overtime police officers. And I've been there every day since trying to find out why the police didn't do their job professionally. Why
they
the mayor
did their job professionally.
Let me finish.
They did their job.
Dapper, you got to let Lewis have his chance.
No, they didn't. Because the bottom line is when Ron Grolivan says this is incredible, this is bizarre, it is bizarre. How the police handle it, the fact that the police commissioner is the only person who has nothing to apologize for because he never said a thing. That the mayor got in front calling out all the police officers, and a rookie cop would know that when you have a case of this nature, when somebody gets whacked in the head, that you're not dealing with a case of a simple assault or a simple robbery. Then you say a confession came from a friend. We got a man who just shot his wife, and he says that he flinched when he went to shoot himself in the foot. That's incredible. I can't believe that. If the man just shot his pregnant wife in the head, why did he flinch to shoot himself in the foot? And
Lewis,
the foot is a long way.
What are you saying, Lewis?
I'm saying that every person involved in this on official level, including the media, failed to do their job, to look at it objectively. They went to the issue of race. They went to the issue that this man who came out with stereotypical a concept of who this person was, and they went no further. That a Cub reporter would have said, there's something wrong with this case, and would have followed it through. Everyone failed to do their job because they were more interested in looking for a black man than they were in looking for the killer.
All right, we're going to ask when we come back, we're going to take a break right now, whether what was done to the Mission Hills area of Boston, to the black community, isn't exactly the same thing that was done to Howard Beach, the white community in New York, when we come back.
Today, more people than ever.
That atrocity up in Boston. Lewis, let me ask you this. It seems to me that what was done to Mission Hills, in other words, the community is awful, it's criminal, we need to send cops in there, is the same thing that Jesse Jackson and Ben Hooks did to Howard Beach when an incident occurred there. Whites were responsible. He said all of Howard Beach was demonized. It's now a famous term, blaming a whole community for what one or two people did. Isn't the same thing being done here?
No, it's not, Pat. In Howard Beach, they didn't throw a dragnet over the Howard Beach community. They didn't stop every white male they thought was involved in the case. They didn't harass and frisk and deprive them of their constitutional rights. They stopped over 600 black people in a 3-day period. They broke into people's homes. They patted people down, made them drop their pants. They took them through the most horrendous, I mean, it's close to Gestapo tactics that took place in that community.
Who's responsible?
Who's responsible? Every public official, law enforcement official who was a part of that.
Was the media
concept.
a part of it?
Absolutely. They were a part of it.
Okay, Dapper, when you were on this show the last time, you were saying this whole thing has nothing to do with prejudice, it has nothing to do with black and white. It now turns out that Charles Stuart was plotting this case precisely to play on prejudices that he knew were there in the community. So can't you now admit, in hindsight, that of course there are these prejudices in the community and that Charles Stuart played on them rather cleverly?
Well, let's assume now if Charles Stuart pulled it off in a white area.
But he didn't.
Would Lewis be complaining then?
Why do you suppose Charles Stuart picked a black area to stage this in? He did it because he knew
it was more probable that something like that would happen
he
there.
Knew it. He knew that because he would play on prejudices like the one you just heard from Pat Buchanan.
Absolutely not, because there's been more domestic homicides in the white areas of this state than there's been in the black areas. That the last shooting of a wife has been in a white community. That 3 weeks after the shooting of the Stewarts, there was a shooting in the same
Pat's answered my question. Lewis has
shooting.
answered my question. I'd like to hear Dapper answer my question. Why wasn't it, if you're going to stage a crime like this, doesn't it make a lot of sense to play on prejudices that you know are in the community by staging this in a black community and saying, oh yes, it was a black man who shot me?
If they staged it in the black community, I know nothing about that. They could have staged it in the white community.
Why didn't they?
I'm telling you now on your show, let the professionals do their job, and when they piece this all together, then I wonder if a Louis Elias will be complaining then. I wonder if he'll complain then. Leave them alone.
Why didn't they do the job in the beginning?
Let the district attorney do his job.
Dapper, why did so many Afro-Americans have to have their constitutional rights abridged before they decided to do their job?
Because that's exactly what's in the area, the Afro-American area. What do you want them to do? Say nothing? They're doing a good job, and I'm proud of them.
to their job.
Would it have been the same if the victims were black, Dapper? I asked you that 3 months ago. I ask you it again. You want to change your mind?
It makes no difference. Crime is going crazy here in Boston, whether you're black or you're white. And
They didn't call out all the available police when Tiffany Moore was killed.
Very similar murder.
Lewis, I'm telling you right now, you've got more cops on that killing than they did in this city, okay? So don't pull that with me, okay?
They did in what city? You
don't
didn't get
pull
as
that
many,
with me,
They didn't
Lewis.
call out all the available cops when Tiffany Moore was killed.
Okay,
That's the bottom line.
On that note, we're going to have to disagree on the facts. Thank you very much, Dapper O'Neill. Thank you here in Washington, Louis Elisa. Pat and I will be back to talk about this amazing story in a moment. Here's what I see. I see Sean Penn as Charles Stewart. I see Meryl Streep, although she may be a little old now to play Carol. Robert De Niro as Mayor Flynn. Maybe Charles Durning or possibly Carol O'Connor as Dapper O'Neill. What do you think? Well,
I think that getting back to the real subject here, I do think this is a clear example of just what happened to Bensonhurst and Howard Beach, demonizing a whole community, Mission Hills in this case, because of an atrocity allegedly committed by a single individual, and it teaches us not to do that, Michael, and it's a good lesson for you fellas.
Of course, there is one difference. In the Howard Beach case, there were whites who had committed these crimes, and in this case, it turns out that they were demonized with completely erroneously.
And what was the color of the assailants in the Central Park gang rape, 20 kids on one white girl?
We're out of time, so I can't answer that question for you, Pat. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. Good night for Crossfire.
From the right, Pat Buchanan. Join us Monday night for another edition of Crossfire.